Hi friends, host Eric here with Talking Fans People, and I want to address a couple of comments here on the Soulmate and Nemesis types video. Intuidine here asks, what do you have to say about types that share the same PM ratio and positions, for example, ENFP to INTJ, MPPP, or ENTP and INFJ, MMP, 9 to 1, M, Mirage, and Socionics. So we're talking about there, or she, whoever it is saying that, well, okay, in Socionics they call that a Mirage relationship, and the equivalents are ENFP-INTJ or ENTP-INFJ, which is say you're dual, but it's your dual, but with the same N or S rather than the opposite N or S. So my dual is ISFJ, my Mirage is INFJ. INTJ's dual is ESFP, their Mirage is ENFP. Well, I'm of the mindset, first and foremost, let me just state that I'm of the mindset that as far as I'm concerned, based on what I currently know, there are two existent realities that conflict with each other a bit and explain a lot. The first reality is, I believe, the only truly right relationship is a duality relationship. That's where you have the right ratio of things. However, I'm only convinced of this for perceivers. I'm not yet convinced of it for judgers. I think it might play out differently for judgers. But I'm increasingly convinced of it for judgers as well. Okay? Having said that, I also acknowledge that implicit in every relationship is a FI component, a component of individual feelings that's unique and particular to the individual person whose belly you're rubbing right now. And that makes that person indubitably special to you in a way that makes I see those that makes relational mechanics irrelevant sometimes. In other words, you build up enough of a history with a person and you're good enough to each other, after a while, who am I to say there's anything wrong with your relationship? I'm in no position to tell anybody there's anything wrong with a working relationship. And I don't want anything I say to ever be interpreted to mean that. Now, having said all of that, I don't think ultimately an INFJ-ENTP relationship would work, and I don't think ultimately an ENFP-INTJ relationship would work because they're not dualities, and in both cases, they're going to leave something to be desired. However, I'm tempted to say it's the closest thing you can get, and if you have that FI component, then of course it could work just fine. It could be a unique kind of rightness that is possessed by the two individuals in possession of that relationship and comprising that relationship and can't be understood by anybody else. And that's the simple truth. The only two people who really know what goes on in a marriage or a girlfriend-boyfriend relationship or whatever are the two people in that relationship. And whatever goes on behind closed doors in terms of the talks they have in private and whatever else happens, is stuff that they may or may not talk about, but it's never the whole story. And the only two people who really know the whole story are the two people in the relationship. That's an awful lot of disclaimer for what I'm about to say, which is, thank you, darling. I think that those two relationship types are about as close as you're going to get to a non-dual relationship working. And the reason for it is, I've been good friends with INFJ before. I know how tight it's possible for an ENTP to get with an INFJ. Additionally, the mechanics of it seem to work well. So you're looking at NI, NE, and basically the any person, any user in the ENTP INFJ relationship or in the ENFP INTJ relationship, the any user is going to naturally go about their life assuming the right course will take care of itself. I need to worry about the possibilities. Vice versa for the NI user, the INTJ or INFJ respectively. So in that case, you have to look at the need and fulfillment aspect of things. The ENTP is SI seeking because we're fundamentally subjective in our knowledge. However, we're objective in our metaphysical action, which means we work off of objective knowledge about the systems of the world all the time. ENFP does the same thing, except they just don't use TI. So I'm not exactly sure how that component comes into play. Obviously, it's more important that the symmetry be there for the TE and the FI than it is that the ENFP be logical from the INTJ's perspective. I don't think the INTJ necessarily requires the other party to engage in logical discourse. They just require them to be predictable in their response to actions. So one of the things that will frustrate the hell out of an INTJ is if they can't correctly motivate people. And of course, people's motivations is the issue of FE. For somebody who's got TE in the second slot, such as INTJ or ISTJ, that means polar FE, which means not understanding how to motivate people well. And being frustrated by the fact that they won't move like objects and systems move. Because while TE is all about subjective metrics, that means you expect systems to be predictable, not consistent. Anyway, the consistency comes through predictability. So obviously, it's a challenge for INTJ to match up well with another party. They've got the FI understanding of the reality that relationships develop over time. And yet, the reality of the modern world is that the pacing of it doesn't allow for old school courtship, and it doesn't allow for leaving somebody uncertain at all. Kimberly expressed to me one time that she was surprised by my not contacting her between when we made the date and when we actually went on the date. We're not wanting particularly to talk on the phone a lot before we went on the date. And she expressed in that when you're dating and you like someone, you better move or somebody else is going to swoop on them because they're dating too. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't even think about it, So fortunately for me, it all worked out with Kimberly, and fortunately for the ENTP, I tend to err on the side of, oh, it doesn't matter that relationships develop over time. I can decide up front, based on logic, whether this person is going to be a good match for me, and just declare my undying love at that point and expect the other party to reciprocate. Now, this is completely insane, but it is my way, anyway, of coping with the fact that I don't understand FI, development of relationship over time, and so I don't want to have to deal with it. I want to know beforehand, and then I'll go all in. So, what do I think about that relationship? Well, if ENFP is like that, and INTJ is like that, then, and I do believe INTJ is like that, and I suspect ENFP might be like that, although I don't know how that NEFI thing plays out. Then, obviously, those two are much more likely to get together than are INFJ, who's commitment phobic, and ENTP, who's commitment jumpy. By nature, not all instances of this. I'm saying, as a general, if you were going to measure it all out, I would say that ENTPs are above average on commitment jumpy, and INFJs are below average on commitment jumpy, or above average on commitment phobic. I would say INTJs and ENFPs, of those two, ENFP would probably be more likely to be seen as commitment phobic or less reliable in their commitments. But I don't know if that's really the case or not. Regardless, you're looking at, in either case, somebody's got F in the polar, one of the F's, and someone's got a T in the polar, one of the T's. INFJ's polar TE won't be a problem for ENTP. I know that because it's not a problem with me and ISFJ. So presumably the symmetry works the same, and TI polar for ENFP doesn't cause problems for INTJ, and presumably, of course, FE polar for INTJ doesn't cause problems for ENFP because it's countervalued in the 6th slot. So In that regard, with the 2 3s the way lined up the way they are with the dual, you get that valuing consistency. And when you have the N's up front, it's not you don't get the conflict that you do if the S's are up front. So if you're talking to me about instead of INFJ, you're talking about what's SENI? No, SE. Well, you're talking about ESTP. Obviously, I'm going to have a big problem with them, right? If you get the SE first, or even ESFP, it's not going to work. If you got the S first instead of the N, it's a disaster. You put the two N's together, they're complementary because one's an epistemology and one's an action function. So I think that works well. I think that the biggest problem in those relationships will be the lack of the other party fulfilling the seeking of each. So as an ENTP, I seek SI. I feel very fulfilled by SI. Kimberly provides a lot of SI. What does the INFJ provide in turn in exchange for that? They don't provide the SI. For them, SI is 8th slot. They countervalue it in the sense that they tend to be either insecure about it or see the enemy as manifesting that or something like that. Because to know subjectively through SI is to actively to not know via NI, and so it's because they countermand each other in that fashion. That's where the 8th slot antithesis comes in towards your 8th slot function. It may express as insecurity, it may express as active antithesis, it may express as that stuff's evil, it may express as a number of different negative shades of negatives. And also kind of aspirational. Like there's a certain amount of hateriness in your own directionality towards that. Ah, good job, Kim. Um, so if what you think you seek they don't like, they're going to feel inadequate in providing what you seek. Possibly. It's a possible angle of things collapsing. Like, if an INFJ was seeking for me more SE all the time, and I was like, I don't like SE. I'm an NE guy, right? We're intuitives, remember? But really, they were seeking SE. And I was like, I'm seeking from you subjective knowledge. And you keep telling me about objective realities of the universe. And they're going to be like, what's wrong with my knowledge? Why don't you like it? So that's my take on those relationships, is that ultimately they wouldn't work, but they're as close to duels as you can get. They're the second best, in my opinion. At least by systemically, it makes sense that they'd be the second best, or possibly INTP-ENTP would be second best because of the quadramate thing. Quadra values may come into play, but I don't really think so because INFJ is Mary, same as ENTP, and just because they're not democratic, I mean, the nature of things is such that things are pretty democratic. Yes, Kimberly?
Is there a component to each type that if they're in these relationships and they're already married to this person, and is there a component to each type that will stay in the marriage, but just there's going to always be like a missing,
Well,
like you know what I'm saying?
I,
Like a lot
I
of people just ignore it and continue on with the marriage.
let me answer that question in two ways. First of all, I think there are some types that will stay for sure and be very unlikely to leave, and there are other types that are much more likely to leave.
Okay. But for the people that are likely to stay, they will always feel like as they get older that there is some aspect to the relationship that they have with somebody, there's something missing.
I think so. They'll feel uncertain. Sometimes they'll feel like, no, this is what I want. This
And
really
make
is.
excuses for it.
And right now it's when I remember when I'm working on it, and when we're all on the same
You know what I
page.
heard a lot of was we stay together for the kids.
Okay, well, I mean that I think is saying basically the same thing as saying we're gonna split up when the kids get old enough. So Okay, I can respect that. I stayed in my marriage until my daughter was old enough, and I don't know. My marriage wasn't bad. I didn't have a bad marriage. It just wasn't. It just wasn't a marriage that was about itself. It was about the kid. So you know, um, people get into relationships for different reasons, and that's going to come into play as well. But yeah, I think in general, my experience is not equal to the reality. I think in general, SFJs are not likely to leave. I think my experience was an exception to that, but it was also a steady drum beat of over 14 years. You really start to understand the stark differences between a couple of people, where people break down, where it doesn't match up.
My ex-husband's SFJ left too.
Did she? Yeah, you. That's how. Yeah, it's you. I was like, who? But you were super young when you left, so um, I think SFJs when they leave young. If they don't leave young, they probably don't leave at all. Then they get left and get all upset about it when they're older. So it's probably better they leave. Now, but the thing is, what I want to answer, the other thing I'll answer to that relationship question about leaving and staying is, I am currently experiencing something where I don't have a shred of any logical or reasonable doubt about the permanence of this relationship. Neither of us is going anywhere. Neither of us is leaving or cheating or even dreaming about preferring another partner because we're we're in love. Yeah, and it doesn't get any better. It doesn't get any better than duality. That's my basic position on the matter. I know that a lot of people are in non-dual relationships. I do not mean to invalidate your relationship. I understand that there's an FI component that makes an individual special far beyond their type, and that takes time to develop, and it does develop over time, and it grows over time.
Because even our relationship is not perfect right now.
It's not
I mean, no, I'm not saying that it's not perfect. I'm saying we do.
not perfect.
You know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean that
Kim,
we
I
don't.
keep telling you, listen, you don't have to match my level of perfection. Okay, sweetie?
Okay.
I jest. I kid. I'm a kidder like that. Some people call me irreverent. Anyway, thanks for watching Talking with Faith People. Thanks for asking that question. I also wanted to say about this other guy's comment before I forget. This guy's comment is really good. I have nothing to add to it, but I'll just read it out loud. I'm an ENTP. I dated an ESFJ, and it's a complete disaster when there is an issue because with their highly developed introverted sensing, they don't forgive or forget. True. Meanwhile, ENTPs don't hold grudges. True. Also, ESFJs tend to be materialistic and derive happiness from community and even fake friendships, and ENTPs don't care about society's wants apart from being productive. True-ish. About the last part, not exactly true, but the first part for sure. Sorry, I said I didn't have anything to add. I guess I do. Also, ESFJs tend to use emotional reasoning as opposed to logic and tend to be stubborn and argue even when wrong. True. And ENTPs are too honest. True. Meanwhile, ESFJs like white lies and often feel extremely criticized. True. And take things too personally. True. When corrected. True.
Wow.
So just FYI, that's all right on the money about ENTP ESFJ relationships. I'm very impressed by that. Whoever that, what was your name again? That was like, bang, Shaolin Drain. Good job. Thanks for watching Talking with Faith People. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. And if you do, well, I forgive you, but next time don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.